And my husband came back to the hospital that evening and he said, "I know you got a healing."
Hello and welcome to Kept in Her Heart, where we talk about all things faith-related. Today, Mary joins us to share about her amazing miracles that she experienced during her cancer journey. Welcome, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess start us off at the beginning. How did this all start?
Well, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer in 2017, January 17th actually. And at that time, I was already having difficulty breathing. Fluid had filled in my lungs. And then fast forward, in February, I wasn't feeling good. My husband was at home and he said, "Well, let's take you in. I'll lift you in the vehicle." I said, "You just gotta call an ambulance. I can't do it." And so he called an ambulance and I remember the ride there and I don't even remember getting into the hospital. I was out by that point and they said I was minutes away from dying.
Wow.
Because the fluid just had overtaken everything. So that was the beginning. And like I said, I don't remember any of this. They transferred me to Unity Hospital in Fridley, where I ended up being there for 3 weeks. And during that time, it was really touch and go. I was in and out of ICU several times, in palliative care and all that. And it was really rough. I remember moments where I just didn't feel like eating. It was just too much work. But prayers were always there, and I had wonderful staff that said they'd pray for me, and it just was very calming to have them saying that, knowing that they pray. You know, I actually didn't even think that in the hospitals they could really say that.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably half of them were giving me words of encouragement and just messages that things will be okay, God's got this, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And there was some trouble there, you know, in those last sort of days when it looked like it was going to be your last days. Like your kids got the chicken pox and
Oh, yes.
almost couldn't visit you. And
Right, yes. So at the beginning of my stay, I was on a ventilator and I was out, obviously, and I was so sick, they didn't think I was going to make it. So a friend of mine, her mom had called and said, she called Stephanie Persick, who eventually ended up being our Medjugorje pilgrimage guide. She said, "Will you please go to the hospital and pray for her? She probably won't make it." And so Stephanie was sick with a cold, and she thought, "Well, I don't know." But being I wasn't supposed to make it, she said, "I'll go, because what else?"
right.
So she came, she prayed over me, she laid the true relic of the cross on me, and my dad and my husband both said they felt like that was the turning point for me. And my health, like I said, was touch and go for a while in the hospital, and things evolved from that. Near the end of my stay, there was Fr Ubald was traveling around Minnesota at different parishes doing healing masses. And the history behind Fr Ubald is he was from Rwanda, Africa, and they had a genocide and his whole parish, I think, was wiped out. He lost all of his family in the genocide, and he got this gift of healing. And his message going around was all about forgiveness. He eventually adopted the boy whose father had killed his family.
Wow.
Yeah, so forgiveness.
Yes.
And he was in St. Anthony, right near the hospital. And I was obviously too sick to go. My husband went, and there he saw Stephanie, and she said, "How is she doing?" She said, "I was so worried about her. I prayed. I was sick, but I stayed up all night praying for her." Complete stranger at the time doing that for me. And then my husband was able to receive the Eucharist from Fr Ubald, and it was just a great evening. So Fr Ubald's healings, he does not say, "Jenny, you are healed." He just says the symptoms or what's going on will be healed. And then you're to claim it if you feel that was your healing. And my husband came back to the hospital that evening and he said, "I know you got a healing." He said he had mentioned someone that had breast cancer that started on the right side, has lung issues and bone issues, and that was everything I had.
Wow.
So my husband said I was too emotional to give a testimony that or claim your healing. So he said, "I just wasn't able to do it, but I know it was for you." And during that time, my friend's mom that had called Stephanie had given us a book that was called My Heart Will Triumph. And it's all about the Medjugorje children as they were being raised in a communist country. The communists not believing them that Mary would appear to them. And it's just a phenomenal book. And my husband would read that to me at night. And he's a convert, and he got so emotional reading that book to me when Mary would appear to the children. He just knew how miraculous that was and special.
Yeah.
So that was a really special time that we had where he was reading to us. Then the night before I got out of the hospital, we saw that Fr Ubald had his last healing mass at St. Anne's in Hamel, Minnesota. So Hamel wasn't too far from us, and it was 2 nights later after I had gotten home. And I really didn't feel good. I was using a wheelchair at the time because I was so miserable. And my husband said, "You really should go." So I did. He lifted me in the vehicle and off we went. And the church was packed. Fr Ubald was there, and the mass was said, and he went around carrying the tabernacle and held it.
The Eucharist, yeah.
Right in front of me for a long time, which was really powerful. And he continued on, and mass was ended, and the healing service began, and it was one healing after another. And it was such an incredible experience. And that time, my husband did get up and claim the healing that I received at St. Anthony.
Okay.
And it was another neat story was there was a gal there that her knees were bothering her, so she wanted a healing from her knees. And she had said, went up to the podium and she said, "I saw that so many other people had so much greater suffering than I did." And she said, "I realized I didn't need the healing." But she said, "I did get the healing. My knees don't hurt." So that was incredible. And at the end, they asked how many people feel like they received a healing. And over half the church raised their hands.
Praise God.
Yes. And that's to include people that weren't even present there that were healed.
Wow.
A blind person, a blind child being able to see.
Wow.
And there was a divorce. The papers weren't going to get signed, but you wouldn't know that when you were at the church. So even more healings where there were more than just half the church.
You know, it's so great to watch God at work. He's so generous and he is so loving. I love that story, and I know you have a lot more to share, but we're kind of out of time for this session. So I want you all to stay tuned. Mary's got more incredible stories to share of healing that God has done in her life. And stay tuned.